Hey, what's going on, YouTube? Ever since these new infantry heroes came out, I've gotten a lot of requests about like how to build them, how to use them, hero pairs, artifacts, pets, etc. And so today I thought we'd take a look at them, and in particular Kuma, because honestly, like for every one request about Lee Quan I get four for Kuma. It makes sense. Kuma's, he's the open field hero, whereas Lei Quan's got the rally skill. Kuma's going to be available through the wheel, whereas Lei Quan's the strongest Lord hero. It just makes sense that a lot more people are going to be focused on Kuma versus Lei Quan. I think they're both strong, but I expect Kuma to see more play in the field. So let's take a look at his skills here, and we'll start with his rage skill, Joy of Battle. Now that I've had a chance to play with Kuma a bit, both rallies and open field, let me tell you, Joy of Battle is super strong. I think there's a very strong argument that Joy of Battle is the single strongest skill in the game today. Okay, what does it do? It hits your target and drains them for 20%, and then it also hits any other targets in melee range and drains them for 10%. You'll see that there's no limit to the number of other targets you can hit here. And then you also have some healing. We'll talk about that in just a second. Now, the drain mechanic, as far as I know, is new to Call of Dragons. What it does is not only it reduces the target's hit points, but it gives them to you. You get an HP bonus here. All right, so the drain mechanic, it caps out at 50% on your target and 30% on any sort of splash targets, if you will. So if you're in combat for 3 rage cycles, your target's going to be down 50% of their hit points, and any other targets around you are going to be down 30%. Super strong. At the same time, you'll be up 50% of your hit points. That's great, right? That's great in the open field. It's great in a rally garrison fight too. Super, super strong. On top of that, we also have a little bonus healing factor. Now, the healing factor caps out at 200 here. That's not that impressive, honestly. There's some other healing things we'll talk about later on. I'm kind of interested in where the developers think we're going to go with this. All right, his second skill, every 10 seconds in battle, he heals, and he heals twice, right? And you can see I don't have it maxed out here, but if you have it maxed out, the first tick is a healing factor of 50, and the second tick is a healing factor of 100, but that second tick scales, or maybe I should say it should scale with the infantry HP bonus, which is one of the most confounding mechanics in the game right now. I think the infantry HP bonus is broken, or at least this skill is broken, because this is not scaling like it should, and this is the easiest thing to test. So, okay, you're going to get 50 and 100 factor, healing factor every 10 seconds, on top of the 200 healing factor you get every rage cycle. So we already got 2 healing skills, but like a combined total of 350, basically once a rage cycle. That's okay. We'll talk more about that later on. Third skill, nothing particularly interesting. We just get some defense and attack. Hey, that's great. Caps out at 15%, but nothing you need to particularly worry about. Now, his fourth skill is kind of interesting. Now, first of all, this is a fielding skill, right? And when he's in the field, so this is not your rally garrison skill. But basically, every time, a legion is defeated, you get stacking bonuses starting at 10% up to 100%, and you also get a healing received bonus, all right? So there we go again. We see healing one more time. This really encourages Kuma to be in the middle of a massive open field fight in which there's a lot of enemies. Maybe you charge Kuma into the enemy ball when it's starting to gain low. They start dying, and then he gets massive attack bonuses. Okay, that can be strong, but it's kind of situational, and it's nowhere near as strong as his rage skill. And then his healing bonus. So now we have 200 healing factor off the rage skill, 150 healing factor off his second skill, and then all that gets a 20% healing bonus at most when he's in the open field and a bunch of enemy legions have died. Okay, that's honestly not that impressive, right? 350 healing plus a 20% bonus at most. This might be an interesting way to pair him in the future. Okay. His awakened skill, whenever he hits a buff with an innate skill, he gets 20% hit points. Okay, another massive hit point boost. And this lasts for 3 seconds and can trigger every 5 seconds. Okay, so we talked through his skills, but the next question we should answer is, in what order should you level up his skills? Well, I kind of told you that I think Joy of Battle might be the strongest skill in the game here. So, as typical, get the rage skill to 5 before you do anything else. All right, the next 3 skills, I think his second skill is his weakest skill by far. Now, this might be partially because I don't think it's functioning properly at the moment, but even when it works well, unless this scales to an extent that I don't foresee happening, this is just isn't much healing. I think this is his weakest skill, so try and skip it best you can. So after his second skill, I find his third and fourth skills to be about equal in power, right? His third skill, nothing particularly complicated here. He gets 15% defense, 15% attack. Okay, that's nice. His fourth skill is this sort of like open field, defeats enemies, stacking attack bonus. Well, he doesn't really care that much about attack. His first skill, his rage skill, which is so strong, does not scale off of attack. So getting this up for him is not a priority. However, it could be extremely important for his deputy. For example, you pair him with Lei Quan. This is awesome if you can get it stacked up. Of course, this is only a fielding skill, so it doesn't apply all the time anyway. Third and fourth skill, about the same. I think his third skill is actually slightly stronger than the fourth skill. So my best advice to you is after you max out the first skill, open up the rest of them so you can maximize your chances on landing on 3 or maybe 4 while minimizing your chances of landing on number 2. Okay, who should we pair Kuma with? Well, the first and most obvious answer is Lei Quan, and I do think they work well together, but not perfectly well. There's some lack of synergy in a couple of their skills. Most notably, Lei Quan's rage skill does a massive amount of skill damage, but Kuma himself does no skill damage. And so if you're building him out, if you're taking his talents, if you have a pet or whatever, should you invest in skill damage if these are your pair? Well, it's kind of like, I don't know, because one of them does a great amount and one of them does hardly any, so maybe. Finally, the fourth skill, if you have Lei Quan, whenever you get hit with a normal attack, you've got a chance to gain HP and more damage, and stacks up to 10 times. A couple things here. This is another like, hey, throw them into the big ball, have them fighting a ton of people, hopefully at melee range. This is a really good payoff to that. The other thing here is this is an innate skill that will give you buffs, and that will trigger Kuma's fourth skill, right? So Lei Quan is good for that. All right, so this is an obvious pair. Anyone else we should think about? Well, I think Kuma's going to work with anyone pretty well, but there's someone that I'm really interested in, that's Garwood, right? Because Kuma's got a lot of skills that boost healing, but his own healing's kind of mediocre. So maybe you pair him with a hero that does a lot of healing. And the obvious answer there is Garwood. You know, Garwood's rage skill, it has a healing factor of 1200. That's basically, 3.5 times what Kuma gets, and it gets to 1400 if you have him awakened. So all those extra healings, all those like healing buffs with Kuma, you pair him with Garwood, that's really good. The rest of Garwood's kit just makes him sort of more tanky. But hey, that's like kind of what you want with Kuma, right? You throw them in there, and then you're in the middle of that ball, and you just live a long time. I think Kuma Garwood is a really interesting, really, potentially very strong pair. The other sort of like no-brainer, hey, let's do this, is Gorish, right? Now you throw Gorish in, what does he do? He's mostly counterattack, right? So like, hey, you love to be counterattacking if you're in the middle of that big ball. And Kuma is not only going to keep you alive much longer, he's going to drain everyone around you while you do that, which, increases your hit point, decreases their hit points, makes them all much more vulnerable. So I think Gorish Kuma is another obvious pair. The other infantry heroes, I think they all will probably work decently well with Kuma. You also might consider like Mu here, because Mu does healing, and Kuma's going to boost that healing a lot. And then even someone like Indus, who's like very survivable and put debuffs on the enemy, this could be a very interesting like, hey, I'm going to throw Kuma Indus out there, it'll live a really long time and debuff all the enemies around her very well. Okay, how do we build Kuma out? I think you have a couple choices, and I'll go through them there. All right, so obviously you got to start here. First level, I've seen some people taking overall defense. I always like a little bit of movement speed. I don't need this guy to be like running races, but I don't want him to be super slow either, so I usually go for the overall speed. Obviously, you go for extra hit points. So then your first choice is what tree do you want to go down the end towards? I think the infantry tree is just the strongest for him. So all of my builds kind of end up, finishing the infantry tree, and then I make some choices there. So once again, we have to start here. Then what do we want? Well, he does no skill damage. Now, if you have him paired with Lei Quan, Lei Quan does amazing skill damage, so at least you think about this. But Kuma himself gets nothing from this, so I don't really recommend that unless you have him paired with Lei Quan, and then it's like, I don't know, maybe. Less hero skill damage, that's 100% on point. The infantry speed gives you a 15% movement speed bonus. So it's really between these two. Do you want the more movement speed, or do you want to make him tankier? I think this is a valid choice. I actually kind of lead towards egoism here. All right, the next level, we got 3 choices, and I don't love any of them. More normal attack damage. He's not really normal attack focused. Now he's going to do some. Okay, that's all right. Second skill, he moves faster when his unit count gets low. This is usually sort of like the escape skill. Like, how often do you escape with your infantry? Usually you're there until they're dead. So I don't love this. And then we have the Heaven's Blessing and a little extra healing. If all you have is Kuma healing, this is trivial. This like gives you an extra like 10 units over the course of a battle. Now, if you got him paired with Garwood, okay, I understand that. But otherwise, it's between these two. Neither of them are good, frankly. If I don't have him with Garwood, I'd actually go here. If Garwood is his pair, if it is his deputy, Heaven's Blessing, I'd go that way. Okay, the next level, do we want him to attack a little stronger, or do we want more defense? This is obvious, we want more defense, so we go there. Okay, the next level, we have slower movement speed while bigger attack. Nope, I don't care about attack, and he's already slow enough. More damage to cav units. I'm not really doing damage with this guy. Maybe if his deputy is like Lei Quan or something, I'd think about it. But here, less normal attack damage. Yes, that's 100% on plan. Archers are going to be targeting me like crazy. I need that. So the next level I think is pretty obvious. Generalist is actually pretty decent. 150 healing factor. I'm not sure. More counterattack damage. Yes, please. I want the counterattack for sure. This next level I think is pretty obvious when you think how he's going to be used. We do not want solid shield. He doesn't get a shield. Do we want encouraging dance? Hey, I love the rage cycle on this guy. I'd love to get extra rage. But remember, I'm throwing him into the middle of a huge ball. He's going to be surrounded. Let's take out that surround penalty, like, 3/4 of it. Flank protection, 100%. Now, his last level is another pretty obvious choice. We can get Iron Will, which extends the buffs you get through rage skills by 1 second. Now, he does get a very powerful buff through his rage skill, but it lasts the length of combat. It's not limited by time. So we definitely want Ready for Battle, which gives him an 8% chance to launch an extra counterattack every time he's hit with a normal attack. 8% might not seem like much, but think about what you're going to use him for. He's going to be hit with a ton of normal attacks, so this should proc pretty frequently. I want Ready for Battle. Okay, now that I think this is basically what you're going to get for this hero regardless. The only sort of change I'd make is maybe the movement speed if you want it, and then maybe Heaven's Blessing if you're running with Garwood. Okay, so then we have, I think, 3 main choices. The first choice is you can just say in the infantry tree, there's a lot of strong stuff here. Like, obviously, you'd pick up the extra movement speed. You'd pick up Intimidation if you have him with Lei Quan. You'd pick up Encouraging Dance, etc. Okay? The second option is you go down the support tree. So if you go down the support tree, more hit points, I love that. Then on this level, we have the healing increased by 5%. Okay, it's another one of these if I have them with Garwood maybe, but otherwise no. With some more normal attack damage, pretty underwhelming, or extra rage. Yeah, I like extra rage, let's grab that. Then the next level, we have no shield, so ignore that. Then we have more defense, or we take less normal attack damage. I think you want the less normal attack damage. You're going to be focused fired by archers a lot, and this is going to help you survive them a little bit longer. Okay, and the final level is pretty obvious here. We either remove a debuff once every 20 seconds, or we get extra HP, 0.5% up to a maximum of 3% every time we get a buff. Look, that's 100% on plan for what he's doing. You get the infantry HP buff mechanic, assuming it ever works. And, just more HP is good anyways. I want that. And then you just sort of have one random point. What do you do with it? I like a little movement speed. Thank you. Okay, so we talked through the support tree, but I actually think there's a better option for him, and that's going up the PvP tree once you finish off the infantry tree. All right, so obviously you take this. So the second level, we got 3 choices. We don't want rivalry. Normal attack's not our plan. Do we want defense or do we want movement speed? Actually, I think I'd rather have the movement speed than 2% defense, but these are both valid choices. Then we have the, HP of the units, or the skill damage, or the head held high. If you have Lei Quan as your deputy, this is a good choice. If you don't have Lei Quan as your deputy, I would like the rage. Okay, this is really important. We get Army of Valor, which increases our damage by 1% up to 3% for every 10 seconds of battle. That's just not Kuma. I don't do straight damage. I do like a 20% debuff to everyone. I love that. Or we can get luck of the draw, which every time we get a counterattack, we have a 10% chance to reduce damage by 1%, stacking up to 3%, lasting 20 seconds. I'm going to be doing a ton of counterattacks. This is a long-lasting buff, 20 seconds, a 3% damage reduction. That's really good. I want luck of the draw. And this is actually I think the second strongest talent that Kuma can grab after, ready for battle. And then we have this last point, what we do with this. Extra counterattack's great, or movement speed. Those are your two choices there. I'm going to go for the extra counterattack. All right, that's how I build him out. Okay, so what about artifacts? Well, obviously the Serpent's Edge is the one designed for him. It's the one, if you look at his graphic, he's actually holding in game. It gives him extra HP and sort of like drains people around him. That's awesome. It also inflicts a slow, which is nice. And then it's also got a synergy effect with the infantry HP bonus mechanic. Okay, so you don't have the Serpent's Edge. What artifact should you use? Well, one of the things I thought about was the Deathless Vines, because it reduces its cooldown when you do healing. The thing, however, is it requires 600 points of healing factor. So this, okay, you're going to get some synergy with this, but not a ton. I mean, it's got good HP, rooting people in place is kind of what you want to do. So this is fine, but it doesn't have the amazing synergy I thought it might have for a second. I think Greymar's Warhammer is like the strongest artifact in the game right now. It works great with Kuma, so this is another option. And if you're a free-to-play, low-spend player, what should you go for? Your best option is probably the Fangs of Ashkari. And actually, this has pretty good synergy. Not only does it give you good stats, you want Legion defense for your unit, but what happens, you have a bunch of enemies in close combat, you've drained them of half their hit points from your rage skill, and then you drop this thing which does ticking AoE damage all around you. The damage factor isn't that huge, but remember, once you get 3 stacks of your rage skill off, all your enemies are at half hit points anyway, so this will actually do a lot more damage. So this is a very good choice if you are a free-to-play, low-spend player. And finally, we'll talk briefly about the pet choice. Now, if you saw my prior video, I think the Mossrock, or, the pet released for them, synergizes perfectly with them. It is what you want. I think it is the best pet choice for them. If not the Mossrock, what should you go for? The Bruin Bear works fine, and the Poison Lizard works fine. The Moon Bear is not a good choice for Kuma because the Moon Bear requires rage skill damage and he does no rage skill. Now look, it's going to depend on your deputy on that one. But just for him, you either want the Bruin Bear or the Venom Lizard if you're not going with the Mossrock. The Mossrock should be your first choice. The last thing about pets, obviously if you go with the Mossrock, this is the pet damage build that I recommend. Particularly for open fielding, there's still a question of whether or not this is the right pet if you're going to rally Garrison with these guys. But what if you don't have all this money? Well, look for a budget build for the Kuma, Laquan pairing coming in the next few days. Hey, that's all I got on Kuma. Like I said, I was getting a lot of requests for the new infantry heroes, particularly talent builds, and especially for Kuma. And so that's how I think you should build them out. I've been testing them out on my accounts, and for me, that's been the best performing builds that I have. And that's all I got for you today. And until next time, you stay classy, Belleron.